Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of the FinTech Hunting podcast. We have two fantastic guests for you today. They are industry thought leaders, change management experts, strategic business leaders. Please help me welcome to the show Michele, who is the CIO at American Pacific Mortgage, and Kerri, who is the VP Relationship Management and Client Success at ICE Mortgage Technology. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, well, it is great to have you. You guys have a wealth of knowledge and expertise, so I want to dive right in. You guys specialize in change management and mortgage innovation. Sounds awesome, but what I know is there's a lot of pain and struggle with that because change is hard, especially in highly regulated industries. So give me your perspective on what are some of the biggest barriers to driving meaningful change. Michele, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I think one barrier is usually kind of around risk psychology and not regulation. So a lot of the times people will overthink about what could go wrong versus seeing, like, what are we already losing by staying still? So, sometimes it could be hampered that, they're afraid to push a little bit further beyond the scope of thinking that it's a regulatory issue, but it's more about their concern about the risk of the change rather than looking that the change could actually come to great outcomes, right? And that if by not making a change, you're not going to be any better than what you are today. I like to kind of call it that, mortgage change succeeds when risk is managed and momentum is protected.
I love it. Michele, great insights. Kerri, what would you like to add to that?
Coming from the technology side, the thing when people are launching new technology, making the decision to launch new technology, I think sometimes they underestimate the effort of the people that's required to make that happen. And so making sure that those people are a part of the plan are so important because they're the users, they're the ones that are going to drive, right, as Michele mentioned, the momentum of that success. So not forgetting about the people, bringing them in the process, making sure that the plans include space for them to fail and fail quickly to be successful.
Yeah, I would add Michele, to that that people, process, and tech are not separate work streams, right? They're a single system, so you need to account for all of them. Absolutely, Kerri. Yeah.
You guys share that, and like we've said, that people, process, and technology is critical. We've talked about the people side. Every team wants to innovate, but not every team is aligned. What are some practical ways that mortgage leaders can galvanize cross-functional teams to embrace change? Michele, we'll start with you again.
Oh, sure. So first of all, y'all, you have to bring them all together so that they all, own the outcome. So you need to have a metric that each group can be counting on to deliver. So you can't have a separate metric for IT versus the ops group versus your compliance group. Basically you need to have a very clear goal of what it is you're trying to accomplish. So that there's no friction of, people going one direction thinking they're solving for one thing and here's the KPI. So they really need to align around what the issue is that they're trying to solve for, have a good metric that they're all driving towards so that they become a team and they're all tied to the success of that, right, through that metric.
Great point. And as we talk about that metric, Kerri, I'll tee this one up for you first. We often rush to solve problems before they're clearly defined. Can you share an example where slowing down to map out that process really has an impact?
Yeah, so I think, and especially from the technology side, people want to assign a solution or a product, right, to a problem before really understanding what that root cause of the solution is. So you could find yourself, we've done some discovery with customers where we're trying to help them with a workflow. We think we have a solution. Really what we uncovered is much more up funnel in the process, right? They had a data integrity issue that was causing the downstream problem. They actually didn't need a technology solution, right? They needed an operational change that improved the data quality downstream to make the technology irrelevant. A proud moment is being able to help somebody get out of their own way to do that and then find other ways where we can help you because that was causing other problems that hadn't yet even been identified.
Oh, I love it. Michele, what would you add to that?
I would say that one of my favorite terms I like to say is that we have a tool looking for a problem to solve. And so I 100% agree with Kerri that, a lot of the times we think the problem's X, but when you dig in, it's actually Y. And so, the one thing I would say, slow discovery makes fast delivery.
What a great point, because so many times we just want to rush to get to, here's a problem, let's start on our checklist and just start knocking things off, and not really understanding what is the problem we're solving for, what are the ways that we could accomplish and go about that. You guys have so many great insights. Now I'm going to kind of throw at you, there's a huge buzzword in the industry. Everyone's talking AI, you know, it can be a buzzword. It can also be a game changer. Michele, I'll start with you. Can you walk me through a specific like AI project or use case that you've seen in mortgage and how you've seen it either fail or succeed?
Yeah, so there's a lot of focus around how AI can be used in underwriting, right? And we have to be careful, right? Because we're not going to let AI make an actual underwriting decision, but we want to leverage the AI capabilities to put the human in the loop to make that final decision. So, what I would say is there's so much to this too, right? When you're talking about AI, people get scared that it might replace them. So, the first thing that you need to really do is like, hey, the AI is not going to it's not going to replace underwriting. It's just going to remove the busy work that's blocking you from getting more done, right? And we really need to, particularly in this AI world, we need to start upskilling our people to understand how the AI works and how it's going to change their job, so they're not afraid of what it's doing, that they actually will embrace it to see how much of a productivity gain it can give them. And then, I would go back again to where I said how innovation sometimes gets squashed a little bit, is that fear of the regulatory or the not knowing. Working very closely with your compliance department, they have to be forward first in any AI initiatives that you're working on, so that you have clear auditable trails to show any auditor that may come in. And also that transparency in the AI will really help your end users adopt it as well. Because I've seen different tools. I mean, go back a few years ago when we were using a particular tool, it was kind of like the black box. And so people question it and they're not sure, is it right? So you don't really see that productivity because people are still trying to do it the old way because they don't know for sure that the system's accurate. So you really need that transparency in your system so that your users can say, hey, you know what, this is right, this is great, and that can help move your adoption and that change management and trust of the system forward, which will allow you to really get the value out of that solution.
So many excellent points there. I think upskilling is absolutely critical. People have to get comfortable with the solution. And then, like you said, you have to start defining what it is we're using the AI for and have that transparency to build trust. Kerri, from your perspective, anything else you would like to add as it relates to our AI discussion?
I think AI has an enormous opportunity to improve, right, a lot of workflows for what lenders are doing, but kind of taking into account everything that we've said, making sure you're solving for a root cause instead of a shiny object, right? That you really understand your workflow and what it's solving, and then bringing those people along with having the right governance around, right, from a compliance and regulation standpoint, that you feel like overall you've protected your business and that you understand what you need to put in place to make those tools be effective.
You guys are leading up to this next question, which is great because you've really laid the foundation of what do we need to do, right? We got to start defining success. That's one thing, but one of the other things that I see as a huge challenge in change management is it's great to define it, but measuring it is a whole nother thing. Michele, kind of walk me through kind of that dilemma and how do you kind of work through so that not only are you defining what success looks like, but we can measure it so there's transparency across the teams.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny you say that, Michael, because that's, one thing, and I'm sure I'm not the only lender out there that over the last several years, we're buying all these different tools with the expectation that we're going to see some sort of ROI out of these tools. And a lot of the times you don't get it. And so you really do, to your point, let's pick that one business use case that we're going to apply this to, knowing that maybe there's not really good regulation there. Maybe we pick a lower risk type of use case. you define with the business, okay, if we change this process or implement this particular tool, what does that do from a business perspective? Looking at, like, is it margin per loan, or is it the cost to originate? Is it a pull through issue, right? Is it a reduction in risk or quality? Is it going to reduce defects, audit findings, your buyback exposure, maybe fair lending signals? And then, how could it potentially impact the human or customer experience, right? So time to competency, or NPS CSAT scores, or time to close, reduced complaints. So, depending on that use case, you need to identify, first of all, what is the problem you're trying to solve for? And then secondly, what does that mean to your business, both, from a financial perspective, from a risk quality, or a customer experience perspective? Align around that, so that you actually can take a look when you're finished doing that initial pilot. Pilots are always great, right? Test it out, make sure it's running really well before you scale it, particularly with AI solutions. But you really do need to think through those ROI items, and what is it, what are your KPIs, and actually think of that before you do the task, because if you haven't defined that, you're not really going to be able to have any data at the end of the day.
That is so true. Kerri, from the tech side, talk to me about, that measurement and why it's so critical so that you can have success with your clients and the solutions that you're delivering.
Yeah, in really successful implementations, we've seen, right, an emphasis on making sure that the data that you're going to measure, Michele, like you said, is there ahead of time, right? Am I already good at measuring this? Right, then I begin to implement the tool, talk about, right, what metrics we think are going to get enhanced or improved, reduced, increased, right, whatever that may be. And then while I'm implementing it, right, I'm making sure that those metrics are tracking, are happening, and then have a time frame where we're partnered together to make tweaks and figure out, right, maybe it's running A/B testing, maybe it's doing something what a pilot could offer, so that I can start to see those results, and then have, really critical, is have an agreed upon timeline over when those results happen. So, right, sometimes we want to see instant success, right? And there are tools that can drive that within 30 days. Sometimes it might be 90 days, or, right, even 6 months before we're going to see that increase. And then going back and routinely looking at where, if it's breaking down, what could be happening. Is it a people adoption issue? Is there a tech breakdown? Do I have a shadow system running on the back because I had to do some change to get there? So I think it's about being transparent and being clear, and then, but having those guardrails of the start and end times that you want to look to measure.
Oh, so many good points. You guys are welcome back anytime. We've still got a couple other topics to discover, but you guys are killing it with the information. I know our listeners are taking notes, but we've talked a lot about technology, but what I'm finding and what I have seen is digital transformation isn't all about new tech. It's also about shifting that culture and getting that buy-in, even, especially with AI today. Michele, talk to me about why it's so critical, not just to focus on the tech, but how we start focusing on developing the right culture.
Yeah, culture is huge, right? And that's something we're really looking at. We're from the top down right now, and we're coming back to AI because it's the buzzword, right? It's going to change our business over the next few years. And if you're not thinking about how that changes the culture of your company right now and bringing up people with you, you're going to have a really hard time getting people to adopt these tools and make that cultural shift. But I think what you need to do, it's kind of like I mentioned you earlier, is when people see change like this, particularly these kinds of productivity, gains and automation, that maybe it takes 25 to 30% of what they do away every day, they get nervous about their job, right? And this is kind of something we talked about before. From an organizational perspective, you need to start talking about, here's what AI is going to do for our business. Here's the path forward. And again, it just comes down to that reassurance. AI is a productivity tool for us to allow you to get rid of the repetitive things that kind of are boring and that are time consuming that you do every day. Let the machine do that, and let's leverage you for that human capacity, that critical thinking skill, that empathy, the things that a machine can't give. that we want them to be focused on, and show where that takes them, right? And I think more than anything, as organizations, we have to be providing tools and education for our people around these new tools. I mean, I've said it many a times, the advent, since ChatGPT came out in around 2022, it's as big as the internet. That's how much it's going to change our businesses. It's just like when the internet really took off. And so, you really do have to be thinking about your people and how change affects them, because we all know, as humans, we don't like change. So, and we're afraid of it, right? So making sure you're aligning and explaining where your organization is going, so maybe there's less fear, so people adopt better.
So Kerri, you're lead up customer success. So talk to me culture wise, not only do you have to have it internally at your organization, but how do you create that with your clients so that there's a culture and this collaborative partnership to work together? How do you make that happen?
Yeah, so the organization at Ice Mortgage Technology that I run, we talk to lenders across the country, right? Of every kind of channel, everything that they could be doing. They're all facing these same questions. We have to make sure that my team is ready, right? That change that's happening in our own organization, right, is helping propel them to have better conversations. So we think about, right, what we can do from a cultural architect perspective of how do I reward people that are adopting change? How do I bring into the culture people that have new and innovative ideas and are sharing those ideas, that those voices are louder, right, and shared, so that those are the types of things that we reward and look at as, right, good progress or, right, great performance that might be happening. So, something that Michele was talking about is when people have to change and are doing those new things and 30% gets reduced from their current job.
Yep.
How do I reward what it looks like when they find something more powerful that drives more performance, right? That's harder to do in those areas. So I think when we're talking to customers about technology and things that are happening, we are really just asking the questions like, how are you enabling AI into your own team's lives, right? Are you encouraging them to go in there and find a new recipe or use ChatGPT or, right, whatever tool they feel comfortable in a way in their own life to make it less scary, right? And make it better so that they can bring their own life into the work life and kind of bridge that gap.
Excellent insights. Michele, we've all heard the phrase fail fast, but in lending, the stakes can be really high. How, as an organization, can you create a safe environment for innovation?
Yeah, so I think the big one I'll come back to again is piloting. You want to sandbox it first, learn, find out what works, what doesn't, fine tune your workflows, give a best practice before you push it out to production. You're going to want to create guardrails. We talked about, incorporating your compliance into that, right? Making sure you have good guardrails in place that will give you, limits on your data, who's making decisions, what are the audit logs, compliance as a design as a design partner rather than a final gate check, right? Yep. And then, of course, staging your rollouts with quality checkpoints. But I guess overall, what I would say is move fast on the runway before you take off, right?
I love that. That's a great point. And I'm going to ask you guys, as we're winding down, in your experience, and I'll pose this to both of you, what separates mortgage companies that experiment with change and those that actually embed it in their DNA? Kerri, I'll start with you.
What we see from customers that lenders that really embrace change is that I think they're willing to fail fast, right? They've done that work, so they're willing to try new things. But it's also a top-down and I would say organizational-wide effort. So it isn't one executive leading saying we're moving forward with this. They've brought everybody along. You've got the head of operations, compliance, you've got the risk team, you've got the head of production, right? All involved making that decision around what those results are. So it's when it's top-down and then bottoms up is when we see the most success over and over and over again, that everyone's aligned there.
I love that. Michele, what would you add to that?
Yeah, no, it absolutely, I think top down matters when we're talking about major disruptive changes. It's like when you tell when you're raising your kids, it's not what I say, it's what I do, right? So modeling what you want them to do. And I also believe, to your point, is collaboration. So at APM, like as a leadership team, we get together and decide what our strategic initiatives are. And the team's more important than the individual, right? Because we
Right.
all succeed or fail as a team. So having that collaboration across departments, I think, is really critical. And encouraging feedback, this is something I get excited about with AI and like a ChatGPT enterprise or something, is that you're able to actually democratize innovation across the whole organization because it gives people tools that they've never had before. And that is where I personally believe it's at the line level. It's at the person doing the job, that if you can get feedback from them on where the challenges are and what their ideas are, that's when you actually get successful change, especially when you're collaborating across each group, right? You don't want those silos. You need to look at processes end to end, not in each different little step. But I'm also a big believer, it's that whole change piece, adopting change, knowing that things won't stay the same. I mean,
Right.
we talk about this in technology, and I'm sure Kerri would agree. It's never been as fast as it is right now. We always say how fast technology is moving, but I swear it's never been as fast as it is today, right? It has to be embedded as DNA in your organization that things are going to change, and we have to adopt change, and we move or we get left behind. And that's partially a cultural change. When you're embedding something, you might just be doing a project and moving on. This has to be like a living, breathing thing constantly happening in your organization.
Michele, great insights there. All right, Kerri, I want to end with this one. If a lender came to you today and said, we really want to innovate, we really want to embrace this change, but we don't know where to start, what's that very first conversation you would have with them?
We would say that's really exciting. We can't wait to partner with you, right? We want to meet with your team where we have to focus in on an area because innovation is, right. It's a culture. It's not a plan. So, right. We'd want to identify where do we focus? Where's their pain? Let's do some deep discovery to make sure that the innovation that we're bringing in is actually going to bring you the results that you want to see, right? The change that you want to see within that organization. So I think the first one, right, it would be, unfortunately, I got 14 more questions for you. We're not ready to go just yet, but we'll do this work now so we can run faster later.
Uh, Michele and Kerri, you guys were a wealth of knowledge and expertise. You are invited back anytime to the FinTech Hunting podcast. I can't thank you enough for being guests on this episode of the FinTech Hunting podcast.
Thank you. Have a great
Michael.
day. Thank you for having me.